right place. If you're looking for some inspiration, if you're looking for the ability to thrive, if you want to be someplace where we believe in you, welcome to the Suicide Prevention Show. I'm Jackie Simmons. I'm the host of the show, and I am super excited because we are going on a journey, and this is not an ordinary journey. This is a journey into a world that's shocking and surprising and inspiring. And who knew that you could put all three of those things together? So I want you to help me welcome my friend J Holbrook as we talk about her daughter's suicide note. And there you are, popping in. Oh my God, Cindy, thank you so much for being part of the show.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's definitely my pleasure. It's a great, great, great mission that you're on, and I love it. I love being a part of it.
Well, we are out to have a grand time today, even though this is a challenging topic to talk about. Cindy, when I met you, I had no clue that we would be interacting on this topic. I mean, we're part of a joint venture community. We met on how do you do business? How do you build business partnerships? How do you build relationships and resonance? And then we ended up connecting on this topic.
Yes.
What happened that made this so important to you?
I would say basically, I'm trying to think of where I want to start. We've all had trauma in our lives, and everybody, I think, at one time or another, thinks about committing suicide. And when my own personal trauma from my childhood took heed on my personal life, so much happened, and I wasn't able really to even be the mother that I could have been or should have been to my children. But with my daughter, seeing all of the chaos that was going on in our family, how sad I was, how depressed I was, how my husband and I were, her father and I were constantly arguing and screaming, that she took it all on herself, believing it was all her fault. She was 13 years old at the time. So, and she had went to school. I came, and whenever I went into our den, I noticed that she had left her notebook sitting on the table. And I thought, oh, I wonder if there's anything here that she needs at school. So I opened it up and I found her suicide note. And she was saying how much happier I would be if she wasn't there, because if she was gone, her father would love me again, and there wouldn't be all the turmoil, that her little brother would be happier. And she bequeathed all of her items. She bequeathed her CDs, and she was just bequeathing, her jewelry that she had. She just bequeathed everything to all these different people. So naturally, like any sane mother would do, I went to the school, pulled her out of school, and took her to see a psychologist. And that just brought up other events in our family, because her father was a textbook adult child of an alcoholic who he believed not to air his dirty laundry. And the letter was so detrimental to him that he was like, he was angry at me for taking her to counseling, which is almost hard to believe. And so it was this whole, I think, family dynamic that it changed all of our lives in so many ways. And it took years to get over it. But looking back, it was like, I even wonder how I didn't notice the signs with her.
Oh my
And
God.
a few years after that, I had my own plan that was thwarted by divine intervention. And so looking back at all of this, it's all intertwined to all of the trauma based off of my childhood that led into my family life.
So we're gonna unpack that.
We're gonna unpack that. Yes.
We're gonna unpack that. because that was a lot. That was a lot. A perfectly normal day interrupted by the accidental divine guidance finding
Yes.
of a suicide note in a notebook left behind, and just the inspiration to open it, the intuition.
Mhm.
So then you got everything that went backwards and forwards from there.
Right.
So, yeah. So Cindy, we'll start with that moment, because right in the middle of an ordinary day is when these things happen.
Right.
The things that can shift your life. You said something really, really key. You said what any sane mother would do.
Mhm.
Go get your kid, take them into counseling. And I'm like, oh, bless you. Because I wasn't sane. By that standard, in my own parenting, I wasn't sane. I didn't take the action as decisively as you did, but we both had the same question. So I'm going to put this out there for anybody who has ever had a child or someone close to you on that ledge, or even falling off that ledge. There are not clear-cut signs that you missed. What we're finding more and more is the first sign that someone's in trouble is an attempt.
Mhm.
And they don't all survive. I got lucky. My daughter survived. You got lucky. Your daughter left a note that you
Mhm.
found before she took action on it. It is not about being psychic and being so aware, and there are no signs that you could miss. It is something that happens at a subconscious level within most people, and then they take action, and everyone is caught off guard. So the first thing I just want to say is that as you listen to this discussion, give yourself a break and recognize that if you have lost someone, you have someone in your life who's tried or died, there wasn't something that you missed. There was only something that they were experiencing inside themselves. So that's my first comment. Now we're going to unpack this other piece. Okay. This other piece was about suicidal thoughts in general.
Mhm.
When I wrote the first draft of my TEDx talk, Cindy, I got pushback from my TEDx coach because I put into it the line that suicidal thoughts are normal,
Mhm.
that we all have them. And Freud said that they are normal. I think they're part of our natural problem-solving ability.
Mhm.
My TEDx coach, I don't have suicidal thoughts. I've never had. And I'm like, you ever had a day you just said, I quit?
Right.
I mean, and that's really what we're talking about. We're talking about the day that you say, I quit, and it gets hooked.
Mhm.
That's all. The difference between the frustration exclamation of I quit and a suicidal thought is whether or not it gets hooked in the negative echo chamber of the mind.
Mhm.
Yeah. So you experienced getting hooked yourself.
Right.
What was the day like of the divine intervention? Would you take us into that day?
Um, Number one, I had just, I need to start like a couple weeks before, when I had went to the doctors, and he could tell that I was upset or depressed or what have you. And he made me break down, and I just started sobbing in his office and saying, everything. It was like I had like over 10 deaths in my immediate family and my ex's immediate family, and then going through everything with my daughter. My daughter's father had said he didn't love me, but was going to stay with me for the kids. I really felt alone, abandoned, orphaned, and again, my own traumatic past was playing so much a part of it. And I sort of even might want to start there, because I think this played so heavy into it. As a child, I was sexually, physically, and mentally abused by my father. And he used to keep me quiet by saying if my mother ever found out, it would kill her. She found out, and the next day died of a massive heart attack. So I really had all this guilt, blaming myself for her death. And this is what started the spiral of everything else. It was after she died, everybody else died. My daughter wrote her suicide note, and her father and I started just really having a lot of major problems. And so a couple years of just being so sad and so depressed, I just thought, okay, it's just, I'm tired of fighting. I was tired of fighting. I was tired of trying to find happiness, of trying to find a belonging. And I really felt that everybody would be better without me. But I'm at the doctor's office, and I'm not telling him specifically this, but I'm saying I am just so tired. I can't sleep. I constantly have nightmares. I just think if I could sleep, I would feel better. So my really nice, sort of stupid doctor gave me a prescription for 100 sleeping pills. And naturally, everywhere on the sleeping pill says, do not drink with pills. And I'm like, I do not drink. I will get drunk off of like one margarita. I'm very sensitive to any sort of drugs, alcohol, anything, just very sensitive to it. And I've always known this. So I thought, this is my way, right? The doctor just gave me my perfect way. All I need to do is drink and have these pills. So then I get home, and my daughter's father's like, I'm going on a business trip for 2 weeks. And I'm like, haha. So then I asked my sister, and I said, on Friday, will you pick up my kids from work after school? And because I just want to be alone for the weekend. And then on Monday after work, I'll pick them up. Because I figured if I took my sleeping pills and drank Friday night, nobody would be expecting me till Monday, which was way long enough for me to be gone. And so my plan worked. And so I left work. I went to the liquor store. I bought some orange juice and vodka. I came home. I poured the orange juice and vodka, put it on my kitchen counter, took my sleeping pills, put them on the kitchen counter, and thought, I want to die comfortable. I don't want to die, in my work clothes. So I went and put on my pajamas, and there's a knock on my door. And so I answer it, and it's this lady that had just started working where I worked. And she said, I was just driving by and thought that I would, come and chat with you. And we talked till 2 o'clock in the morning. We never talked about me killing myself, but by the time she left, my desire was gone. On Monday, whenever I went to work, I asked my best friend Liz, I said, where's Mary? She goes, who's Mary? And I go, the girl that just started working here last week. She's like, there's no Mary here, Cindy. There's nobody here that started working here by that name. I'm like, Liz, there is. We had lunch with her last week. And Liz is like, Cindy, we did not have lunch with anybody, just you and I, as always. And I'm like arguing with her. And I even went to our boss and said, isn't there somebody here named Mary? And my boss is like, no, there's nobody here by that name. And I'm like, this is strange. And then Liz, she's like, Cindy, think about it. She's going, nobody. Liz didn't quite have the grasp of what had happened yet, but she goes, Cindy, think about it. Nobody just stops by your house. You live 2 miles off the main road on a dirt road. There's like nobody that's just going to happen to drive by. And, I was so out of it. I didn't even put like that one simple piece together. And I was like, wow, it definitely was an angel that it came and visited me and just talked to me. And for whatever reason, all of my desire went away. And that's actually what put me on my path to so much of my healing. It's what put me on the path to my self journey, to accepting my past, and to having such a big desire to help other people, both in business and in life. It was, I went into social services for a career, which is what I left when I became a coach. So it was just all about helping people that regardless, some people think my trauma is so bad as a child and everything that I endured after my mother died and everything that I went through, but we've all had traumatic past. We all have things, and we're the ones that rank them, but there is no rank. The way that I felt from everything that happened to me is just the way somebody else might feel from somebody yelling at them or somebody rejecting them. It's a traumatic feeling and they're all the same. Something else, when I first started getting depressed, and this was right around the time my daughter wrote her suicide note, we had a really good friend named David, and David also was depressed. And David and I, we connected to each other. We would misery loves company. We would hang out. We were so connected. David actually spent some time in a mental institution, and they had given him Prozac. It was whenever Prozac was first introduced in the early 90s. And his wife kept telling the doctors, David is not right with this medication. He's hitting me, and he's never hit me in 20 years. And they lived by Knott's Berry Farm, and he kept telling everybody, me included, but hey, I was all for it because I was in the same boat as him, that he was going to jump off the bridge. I can't remember the name of the street, but it's right there by Knott's Berry Farm. He was going to jump onto the 91 freeway, and that's how he was going to do it. And he was telling everybody this. And the doctors would not recommit him. His wife tried to get him recommitted. They just wouldn't. And so one morning he just woke up and said, today's the day. He jumped up, went to run out of his house. His son, Willie, who was 17 at the time, started chasing him and called his mom and then started chasing him. And so Willie was like 4 feet away from David whenever David jumped over the bridge. Wow. And we were such good friends, but my thought, because I was in such a mode, was, wow, I wished I was as brave as David. And it's really sad to know, to think that that's how far gone I was, that I seen his act as bravery because I was in the same boat as him.
There's a moment when unhappiness slides into helplessness and hopelessness.
Mm-hmm.
And it is that break, that moment that we can intervene. For you, it was actually an angel.
Right.
I'm going to point out something that's going to freak out some people. There's a moment where being chicken is good for you. It was good for you not to be brave. Okay. Right. I have a friend who says that she's 92, dealing with all of the impact of isolation and lack of mobility. And she says the only reason she has not attempted suicide is because she's too scared. And I'm like, good.
Yes.
Yeah. There's a moment where fear is your friend and being chicken is a good thing. So for all of us who've chickened out, let's just go with celebration.
And, right. And it's,
but you've hit
when, I had told you before, I know whenever we chatted, wasn't too long after my after my divine intervention, I got a new job, and it was social services. And my boss and I became super, super close. And she's who I always call my first coach, my first mentor. But she kept telling me that my life was my choice. And that was huge for me, because up until that point, I had lived for everybody else. And it was even the reason why I contemplated suicide, because I felt like I had no choice. I felt like, everybody that I had loved, experiencing so many deaths. And by this time, my daughter was acting up, which even after her suicide note, her father took her to McDonald's and told her some very negative things about me, and told her he didn't want her to turn out like me. And so this, she's a very stubborn girl, and it sort of, she said, it made me hate Dad and made me love you more, but it made me want to make Dad's life miserable. So she became a very rebellious teenager. She got into so much stuff, but it was a lot easier, I guess. It definitely easier on me dealing with all the crap that she did as a teenager, with versus her actually going through and committing suicide. But that was her purpose to live after her suicide note. It was like, I'm gonna get back at Dad, right? And
that's funny. Yeah, I train suicide prevention advocates, and one of the things that we train them to ask is, what are your reasons for staying? And the idea that one of your daughter's reasons for staying was to make her father's life miserable. I'm like, Yes, and I've got 2 ex-husbands, so I'm going, they have a use, they have a purpose,
Mhm.
it's good.
Yeah, yeah,
I don't think any of mine ever went that far.
yeah, and and some of the things that he told her even that night sometimes still haunts her today because he just was not nice about it. And again, he was like, "You just think I'm so terrible, and you think I'm causing everything," and um, I think a
People
lot of it was
people do what they do,
but
Yeah.
but hey, I played my part too. I can't say it was 100% him because we were a family unit, and we understood things differently. And he was the type of person that, like I said, he was an adult child of an alcoholic. If you have ever read the textbook on adult child of an alcoholic, that was him, 100%. So he could be very difficult for that. But it just, when again, going back to whenever I met my boss and her telling me, "Cindy, your life is your choice." At first, I thought the woman was totally nuts. I mean, this was actually like 2 months after my thwarted suicide attempt, right? After I had my divine intervention, my guide, I was still not better. I just had lost that desire. I had hope. I had,
Mhm.
that something somehow had to change.
Yep.
Um, and whenever she told me that, I told her, "You're crazy." I said, "I didn't ask for my mother to die. I didn't ask for my father to abuse me. I didn't ask for Earl to not love me. I didn't ask for my grandmother and my father to die. I didn't ask for Earl's brother to get murdered. I definitely didn't ask for Amy to be, at this time she was being very rebellious, to be so rebellious and getting into all the trouble that she was in." I'm like, "I didn't ask for any of this, so how can you say it's my choice?" Right? And I always call this period of my time, like probably from the day my mom died up until after I met Carol, my hell years, because not because I felt like nothing could change, there was no hope, and that I was just there to serve other people, and they were there to walk on me and do whatever they wanted with
Mm.
me. And so for her to tell me this, and she gave me books to read, she gave me cassette tapes to listen to in my car, and I started realizing, and also she had me read Man's Search for Meaning.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, wow, okay, well, all this crap, yeah, I can't control none of that stuff, but I can control the way that I think of it. And I can't actually rewrite my past, but I can rewrite the way I think of my past. And it started my healing journey, which gave me the courage and the confidence to leave my ex-husband and to start a new life.
Yeah, there's so much there. This concept of we cannot rewrite the past, but we can start where we are and
Mhm.
rewrite the future.
Yes,
We can
yes,
change the trajectory of our life.
yes.
And so you had intervention from more than one source. And
Mm,
sometimes we get the opportunities to have our lives change and we're not aware and we don't
mhm.
step into them, but they come back.
Right.
They
Yeah.
come back because that's how the universe is designed. The feather, the stick, or the brick. If you're listening for the nudges, they're like feather taps, and you're paying attention. That level of awareness sometimes doesn't come naturally.
Mhm.
For me, the stick might have gotten my attention, but one of the biggest breaks in my pattern took a brick. It took literally me breaking bones in my leg
Mhm. Yeah.
before I had the pause long enough to stop being busy and actually be able to shift something in my
Mm.
world. So I am just super delighted that Carol
Yeah.
came into your life and gave you
Yeah.
perspective and then gave you some tools. Because
Mhm.
mindset is a thing, it's a new word in our vocabulary, people. We used to just call it attitude. You know,
Right.
now we call it mindset. Either way, it's yours to control.
Mhm.
It's the one thing that you have control over,
Yeah.
and getting some really good tools.
Yeah.
So
I do.
let's
I
go
want to
ahead.
add a little bit though. I mean, we definitely can't rewrite our past, but we can change. our perspective about it. And that I think is like so huge. It's like, you know, different things happen to me sometimes where I'm even shocked where some of these layers of proverbial onion gets unpeeled because of the abuse I endured as a child. But number one, I thought it was normal. So it wasn't traumatic to me at the time. It wasn't until I was an adult that I realized how much stuff was bad. But my father was a very intricate part of our lives until the day my mother died. You know, so he was always around my daughter, and everything. And my daughter, you know, a couple years ago, because we're unsure if he ever did anything to her. She remembers being very afraid of him. She remembers she never wanted to be around him unless her brother or her cousins was with her. But she doesn't remember anything actually happening. So we're just unsure. But she asked me, she's like, Mom, knowing what he did to you, how could you let him be around me? And I was like, I was in denial, and I have to accept that fact. And I can't beat myself up over the fact that I actually put my daughter in danger, because I was in 100% complete denial that he wasn't going to do it to her or that I was protecting her. But because my entire life I was brought up with a lie that it was my job to protect my mother, that's what I kept doing even as an adult, which created, you know, all kinds of craziness in my life and in my beliefs, because everything that I did from the time I can remember till the day my mother died was to protect her, without even thinking, because it had drilled into me so much how it was affecting my daughter. And that's something my current husband, he says all the time. He's like, how did Earl let your father be around Amy knowing what he knew? And I'm like, the thing is, again, going back to, he was an adult child of
Well,
an alcoholic. You don't air your dirty laundry.
well, okay. So we're going to call it what it is. People do what they do. And as soon as we can stop the insanity of trying to assign motivations to other people's actions, and we go with
True.
what can happen now that's better.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm a firm believer in that, because the labels that we put on ourselves and on other people limit us so much. And it limits our ability to work with other people, because we've made a certain set of prejudgments, a certain amount of prejudice about them because of the labels. And so this is a wonderful possibility for us to imagine a world without labels. Imagine a world where we are able to be aware of our actions. And instead of looking for why am I doing this, we go to what could make this better. And
Yes.
I'm all about the shift from the why to the what. So, you know, if we're coming out of that, what made it better for you, Cindy?
And again, going back to Carol, it was so much with Carol. I mean, she was such a huge part of my life. As I said, she gave me all these things, but she actually I became very close to her. It was a very close mentor. Now, I had said I felt all alone, but she would constantly ask me, what would you do if Earl left? Where would you live? How would you take care of yourself? You know, what is it that you want to do? You know, what stops you? You know, even, you know, whenever Amy was being so rebellious, you know, she's like, as a parent, you have to be careful, because sometimes your punishments to them punish you more, right? Whenever they're teenagers. But she would go through like so many different scenarios, which first of all helped me to see a broader picture of life. Like, it wasn't black and white. It wasn't just this one road, that I actually had choices. And she would just talk to me about all these different choices that I had, and always ask me questions. What would I do? How would I think? Who did I want to be? How would I act different? And, you know, that whenever you start thinking that way, how do I want to be? It's so completely different. And you do start, I started building confidence for the very first time in my life. Because I never had it before I met her. I used to think I was, but I really wasn't confident because I was just confident that I could do what everybody else told me to do. But I wasn't confident in my own abilities. I definitely was not confident in my own thoughts or my own decisions. It was so bad that, I used to phone up my ex-husband at work and go, hey, I don't feel good today. Do you think I should stay home from work? It's like I did not make very many decisions because I always wanted that. Yeah, that's okay. You should do that. So to grow out of that, it wasn't overnight, but it definitely all started whenever Carol told me that my life was my choice. And she stepped in as my mentor, as my friend, as my coach, and showed me what to look at, what to read, and constantly asking me questions that got my mind thinking of possibilities. Whenever you start having those possibilities in your life, that gives you hope.
Oh,
And it makes you believe, yeah, I can do it. I can do this. And it's amazing to me whenever I look at where I am today versus where I was then, because I have such a completely different type of life. And I've seen other people who never have gotten that encouragement, that spark of hope that they can make their lives better.
they
You
haven't
know,
met their mentor yet.
in
They,
social services, there's this one girl, I'll never forget this girl. She came into the office one time and she said, oh, Johnny's getting out of prison, so he's going to be moving back in with me next week. And I'm like, okay, just, and she's like, I know you think I'm stupid. And she just straight in my eyes, she looked at me, she said that because she knew that I knew that Johnny was in prison for trying to kill her. And she knew that I knew that. And I I said, you are not stupid. I said, you are a beautiful person. And whenever you realize that you don't deserve to be treated that way, that's when you will leave him. And she just, her eyes lit up and she goes, you don't think I'm stupid? You don't, because everybody, and I see that even whenever somebody's depressed, oh, just get over it. If they're depressed or down, they're suicidal, just get over it or
that's
whatever.
that's the top thing never to say to somebody who's
Yeah,
depressed.
exactly. And I'm like, and because I told her that she was smart and beautiful and that one day she would make the decision, her eyes just lit because everybody was telling her she was stupid. And I'm like, she wasn't a stupid person. She was in her own life, in her own mind, not seeing opportunities, not seeing what could change. And it was about 2 years later, she came back in the office and she had left him and was really doing so much better in her life. And she thanked me just from that one statement that I did, because I was the only one that didn't tell her she was stupid. And it's I see that like as children, sometimes what do we tell our kids? My father, he was not a nice person, but I remember whenever I was 15, I had this boyfriend, he broke up with me and it was the end of my world. And he just started yelling and screaming at me that I didn't know what love was. And I had no right to be sad because my boyfriend broke up with me. And when we think that our children's problems aren't that big, because you're seeing them as an adult perspective, is like dig back to whenever you were younger, if
It, the reality about perspective.
yeah.
That's a huge thing. And wow. All right, there's a lot here that we can go into, Cindy. The journey that you have is very inspiring, and it has been full of these moments where either someone came in and because of something they did or said, your trajectory changed.
Yes.
Then you have this experience where someone came back to you and said, because of what you said, my trajectory changed.
Yes.
And if there is a message for the world, it is the fact that you may be somebody's angel.
Right. Exactly.
You just might. Anybody listening to this, either live or recorded, you might be somebody's angel just by you showing up and being you.
Mhm.
It's not a strategy. It's not a thought pre-planned. That conversation with this young woman was just, this was the right thing to you in the moment, to let her know that one day she will decide she's good enough to make a different choice.
Mhm.
And I think that's the lesson that I had to learn, was that
Mhm.
I was good enough to make a different choice. And so the whole
Yes.
good enough theme is really important to me. And that's
Mhm.
how I lay everything out. Whatever we get done is good enough. Yeah. It's,
And I think too, you talk about, being an angel, with different people. And I had talked about my friend Liz. Liz started working my work like the week my mother died, and we just hooked up. And I've always said that she was an angel to me. And she helped simply because she let me cry when I needed to cry. She let me laugh whenever I wanted to laugh. She listened to my dreams. She listened to my rants. She listened to all of my trials, that I was going through. She also was so very wise that one time, because my mother died, and exactly 1 week later, Earl told me he didn't love me, but was going to stay with me for the kids. And it was about 2 years later, Liz goes, Cindy, you know that you can never mention your mother dying without mentioning Earl not loving you. And you can never mention Earl not loving you without mentioning your mom dying. These are two different griefs. They have nothing to do with each other. You need to separate them and deal with them separately. And I've seen with, so many people that I've coached over the years and my clients in social services, that we tend to, whenever things happen in a close proximity of
yeah,
time,
we hook
we
'em.
connect to them all. And we need to, I always say we have all these emotions like this yarn of, it's this big ball of yarn that's all tangled up. And you have to start taking out each individual emotion because they're not one. We make them one. And pretty soon we're going to find that one strand that's going to make the rest of them just fall apart. And because it's all these packed emotions that we pack up that have to do with, one or more incidences.
Yeah.
And whenever you're in that mode, and the more you have that packed up, I think the more depressed and sad you become, thinking there is no hope, where you start backing up.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought
Hmm.
that the more we lump it all together,
Hmm.
the more power we're actually giving it.
Yes.
And yeah, the logic says, no, if I put it all together, I can put it in a box and I can put it in the closet and it won't bother
Yeah.
me anymore. But it's like it amplifies the more
Hmm.
we pack it all together. So the individual pieces of our life can be related, but they don't have to be causal and they don't have to be combined.
Right.
They
And
don't,
it's
one
our
does not have to
emotions.
lead to the
Our
other.
emotions.
Mhm,
We're the ones that's combining them from our emotions,
mhm.
because we think, well, I felt this way from this one, and I felt this way with this
Well,
one.
it,
And
I mean, thank God,
yeah,
this is the way the human brain works. If it
yeah.
didn't associate things, we would never be able to apply one lesson to a new
Yeah,
situation. So
yeah.
the brain is designed to associate.
Yeah.
The challenge is when it's done unconsciously
Mhm.
around constricting emotions,
Yeah.
around what we call
Mhm.
negative emotions, low energy emotions,
Mhm.
whatever the language of mindset of the day is.
Yes.
We're talking about places that don't feel good, the
Mhm.
emotions that don't feel good. When we hook all of those together and allow them to compile. So, what's your favorite strategy for unpacking
It
emotions?
and it, that it exactly is. And number one, we don't feel our feelings, And I mean, journaling definitely helps, but what has always helped me, and I was a divorce coach for about 7, 8 years before I became the Visibility Wiz. So, and I used to always have so many of my clients do this exercise. I had this one client, she was so cute because she told me, I don't want to hear the word forgiveness. Don't ever tell me to forgive my ex-husband, because I will never forgive him. And all I did was have her do this exercise. And about a month later, she's like, wow, I forgave him. Right. It just, because we don't allow ourselves to feel the emotions, and we do tangle them up. We do intermix them. So my favorite method really of untangling them is to write down all the emotions you have. And if you say like, it's not an emotion, it's a belief. So if you say, I feel like, you're talking about a belief you have, which you have to put into another area to deal with that belief. But if you say, I feel angry at Earl for not understanding what Amy's going through, or I'm angry at myself because I caused my mother's death. I mean, I actually honestly thought that. I feel sad because Earl doesn't love me.
Being able to write
And
down your emotions
but
without
after you
judging them.
write it down, it's more, because you write down all of these things, and usually a lot of these are the surface emotions. But whenever you start saying them, and I believe this so hard, and I still do this to this day, whenever I'm dealing with something, is you have to say that out loud for 5 to 10 minutes straight and watch how it's going through your body, because your head will hurt, your stomach will hurt, you'll tense up. But just say, I feel sad my mother died. I feel sad my mother died. I feel sad my mother died. And you start feeling all these emotions inside of your body, and you just let them be. And most people will start crying because you're actually allowing the emotions to come out of your body and release them. And the more you do this, each time you do this exercise, then you really start releasing it. And you want to get to the point where you can say, I'm sad that my mother died, without having all the tense emotions. I mean, my mother died in 1992. And I learned this strategy dealing with my mother's death in 2010. So I still had so much emotion wrapped up with my mom dying. But I can say, I'm sad my mom died. I'm sad she's gone. I wish she was here. And I don't have that same type of emotion that I used to have. My stomach doesn't tighten up. My head doesn't hurt.
It's
And
no longer part of the ball of yarn.
It's no longer part of the right. So what happens a lot of times is you think it's one thing, and then you start thinking something else. You'll start saying this emotion, and something else is going to pop up. You don't necessarily want to change that emotion as you're saying it out loud, but you want to write it down. And so whenever you start going through all these things that you write down, something will start just unravel it. And it's almost like magical, like overnight, like, wow, because this is one of the core emotions that's been feeding all the rest of them.
So I want to put this into a real simple package for people. Okay. Or actually for me. All right. Let's make it really simple for Jackie's brain here. Step one is notice that I'm feeling an emotion and write it down.
Yes.
Step two is read it out loud multiple times. How many times is a good number to just
I don't go by numbers. I go more by minutes. Okay. At least 5 minutes, up no more than 15 minutes.
5 to 15 minutes. Okay. And so step one, notice it and write it down. Step two, read it over and over again out loud. I love that because it gets to more of the ability to sense things if we're using our ears as well as our brains, and we're using our mouth. So this is great. It engages a lot of senses. So read it out loud, 5 to 15 minutes. And then what? How do you wrap that up? If you said if another emotion comes
by
up,
the end of if other emotions come up, I write it down. I just let it go. I mean, I just move on with my day. You can do, I usually will just do deep breaths, but I'll do my, I don't know what you call that, whenever you do this, like, I know it's some sort of yoga pose where you.
Yeah. I mean, it's part of a yoga pose.
That I will, it's just something I do just to take a couple of deep breaths and go, I'm totally okay in this moment in time, because that brings me back to my present. And then one of the key things about saying it out loud and versus reading it too is why do all these emotions get stuck in us? The main reason is because we're afraid to verbalize them. So whenever you verbalize them, you're actually getting it out of your body. If you're reading it, it stays in your body. And so the whole act of verbalizing it is to get that emotion out of your body.
That's really key. And I like that a lot. Okay. So step 1 is notice it and write it down.
Mhm.
Step 2 is read it out loud over and over again for 5 to 15 minutes.
Mhm.
Step 3 is write down anything new that came up, just any other emotion that's new. And then step 4, I loved what you said. So acknowledging out loud, I'm totally okay in this moment in time.
Yes.
That was a lovely, lovely statement. So ending it with the affirmation, the acknowledgement that I'm okay in this moment in time. There's a lot of wonderful juiciness in that. And so the ability to put it into such a simple system, Cindy, is such a great gift for everyone listening. So I really appreciate you sharing that with us.
You're very welcome. Also, you don't need to, if you have like whatever is going on, you don't need to wait per se. You don't need to say, I acknowledge, like right now I'm angry because, right? But you can sit down actually, and just like if you're journaling, but just sit down and just say, I feel, and write whatever comes to your mind, because you may be surprised how many you can come up with. I mean, I've had people come up with 100 emotions, like I feel. But again, it's very important that if you say, I feel like he should treat me better, that's a belief, and it's a whole different strategy. So you don't use the I feel likes in verbalizing it.
That's wonderful. Okay, so clarity around this. I feel rather than I feel like.
Yes.
Cool. Okay, so as we have a minute, I want to just acknowledge both what you just gave us and what you have that you are giving to everyone else, because your 5 power steps take this basis of some emotional resilience practices and take them into playing bigger in your life. And I just loved that you had all of that together. So Katie's going to pop that into the chat for everyone. And the benefit of 5 power steps, you were talking about standing unapologetically tall, and I loved that language, authentically and unapologetically. And I think that those two things are not often put together in the same sentence, and that they need to be. Authenticity, I think, really requires being unapologetic about our past, about the aspects of who we are, how we got here, and about what we want. I think that maybe we're coming into a space and a time where it's going to be okay to not apologize for the fact that we are thriving, or even that we want to thrive. One of the reasons that I put the title of this show this season as How to Thrive is because I'm seeing thrive or guilt, Cindy. I'm seeing people who are afraid to say I'm doing okay because the messages that we're getting is that everybody's in trouble. Well, no, not everybody's in trouble. Yeah, not everybody's having a down day. What if you owned your great day and shared that with the world and became part of the solution, part of the expanding positive emotional trends, rather than keeping it a secret? And so this idea of being standing unapologetically tall. So thank you. That is an awesome, awesome gift. And I
You're
really
very welcome.
appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
And it'll be in the show notes for anybody who is listening to this in the recordings. You can look for it there. Cindy, if there's one thing that you could share with people on this topic of believing in themselves and thriving, what would it be?
Uh, Definitely, as you just said, unapologetically tall, but it's just know that you don't have to apologize for who you are. And whenever you gain the confidence in yourself that it's okay to be you, you can write a Bill of Rights. You have the right to be treated fairly. You have the right to be treated too nicely. You have the right to your own opinion. So often, and we have the right to say no, and no is a complete sentence. So often, I see so many people even not thriving in their business because of the confidence that they lack because of whatever's happened to them in the past. And so whenever I thought of that, stand unapologetically tall, there's this crazy tree that I can see outside of my office window. It's my neighbor's tree. And I didn't have a neighbor for over 10 years, and this tree has grown so big, and it's not the prettiest tree in the world. And I mean, just branches going all over the place. And one day I was sitting on my porch meditating. I looked up at that tree and I'm like, it just stands there unapologetically, and it just stands tall, and it just says, here I am. And I'm like, what if, we did that as people? We don't care about all these flaws. We don't care that our branches are all weird, or, we have branches half broken falling into the street, and, it just doesn't care. And it still brings beauty. It still, it still has, it's green. It brings shade. It stands there with all of its beauty, even though it really is not a pretty tree. And that's how we should
And,
be in life and in business.
I'm thinking authentically and unapologetically tall means that somebody else's opinion of that tree doesn't impact that tree at all.
That's true.
What if we lived our life where somebody else's opinion of us as our tree didn't impact us at all? What a great note to end on,
There
Cindy.
is a quote. I don't know who said it, but it was other people's opinion of me is none of my business. And I love that quote because it isn't. It's so hard to grasp, but it's so very true.
So very true. All right. So on that note, authentically you and unapologetically tall, and allowing other people's opinions of you to be none of your business. There we go.
Got it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. You are a blessing. I appreciate you and all that you do.
Thank you for being part of the show. Stay right there. The ride gets more interesting from here.